So one thing that is not on any of the reviews that I know is on the final, because I was looking through the final this morning, that I want to let you know about, is we did a whole section on things like this.
Are you recording?
Are you recording?
Yes.
No. That's on the final?
Something like this is on the final.
Oh.
So is something like this.
I'm going to cry.
So is something like this.
You know, it'd be like that.
Is 12i squared, but what do we know about I squared? It equals 1. So 12i, sorry, I'm sick. That becomes 12 times negative 1 or negative 12. And there's something like this, which you have to get that I on the bottom off. So what do? You multiply by I over I. That would be negative 1 times 3 on the top and negative 1 times 4 on the bottom. And you might get something like this. That's the ones where you have to multiply by the conjugate. Do you remember what the conjugate is?
No.
It would be the minus. It would be whatever the opposite is. If this was a plus, you'd be a minus there. If this was a minus, you'd have a plus. And then on top, you distribute 3 minus 12i. On the bottom, you do your multiplying. 1 times 1 is 1. Minus 4i plus 4i minus 16i squared. Those cancels, so I would have negative, 1 minus 16 times negative 1 becomes 1 plus 16, which is 17. And then I don't know how the answers are written. It'll either be written like that or it'll be written like this. Either like this or separate. Uh-huh. So if you want to take a... wait, how do... It is multiple choice. I can't fit it all. Why can't I fit it all?
Because you can't fit it all.
Sorry. The only one you're missing is the addition one, though. So yes, there are questions like this. I wanted to make sure to mention it because I know you guys enjoy complaining, so I know that you guys would complain tomorrow if you saw it and it wasn't on your review.
Our finals on Wednesday.
Whenever your final is.
Yeah, exactly. I love complaining.
By the way, this is something that is new for this class because you guys don't usually come in here at 8 o'clock in the morning. But your final exam is at 8:05 in the morning on Wednesday. If you show up late, you do not get extra time to finish your final. You just cut your time down. Okay? Because unlike some subjects, I have to have your grades turned in at the end of the day. So I can't say, oh, you can come back and finish blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so make sure that you get here on time. I don't know how many of you have troubles getting to school on time because I don't usually see you in the morning, but just keep that in mind, okay? All right. Now, to this side. Okay, I'm going to try and cough as little as possible, but that means I have to talk quieter, so you have to listen harder. It has around 50. I don't know the exact number.
Oh, it's 50 points.
It is 50 points, yes. Okay. Solve by taking square roots. How do I solve by taking square roots? I get that letter by itself, so I'm going to subtract 5. That gives me k squared equals 45. And then what would I do? Square root both sides. And whenever you square root, you remember a plus and minus, correct? Now, 45, you can draw a tree for, can't you? 9 becomes 3 and 3. So what comes out? A 3 because there's a pair of them. And the 5 stays in there.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Okay. Number 2, how would I go about getting r squared by itself? I would subtract 3. It gives me 4r squared equals 160. Then what would I do? Divide by 4. So r squared equals what? 40. Square root both sides. R equals plus or minus. Draw that tree. 40 is what? 8 and 5. 2 and 4. 2 and 2. What can come out? A 2. And what's left inside? 2 times 5 is 10. Easy peasy? All right, what do I do here?
Subtract 2. Add 2.
I'm going to add 2. Uh-oh, this one has big numbers. I might need to get my calculator.
The one that I found.
1259 plus 2 would be 1261. Divide by 13. And I get n squared equals, let's see, 1261 divided by 13 is 97.
Wow.
Square root both sides. So n equals plus or minus is 97 prime? I think it might be. So I have plus or minus radical 97. And you should be able to tell when you're taking the test, because it's multiple choice,
That's the answer.
that you would see that and recognize that that was the answer. If none of the answers had a 97 in it, then you would want to try and draw a tree.
Okay.
All right, what do I do on number 4? That one looks different.
You distribute, that's it.
No, I can't distribute.
What are you talking about? Oh, you read it twice.
No.
I don't know.
I got to get rid of that 6
Yeah,
because
fine.
this is the thing that's being squared.
Oh,
So I need to divide by 6.
Okay, that makes
Got you.
Why are you playing that?
564 divided by 6 is 94. Oops, that's squared. Now I can square root both sides. So I get k minus 2 equals plus or minus. I can draw a tree for 94. I don't know what it goes into, but I know it at least can divide by 2.
Why is it minus 2? Oh, yeah, never mind.
But 47 is prime. So I can't take anything else without anything out. Well, that was lame. So I just have 94. What do I do now?
I don't know.
Add the 2.
And then how do I write my answer?
K equals 2 plus
2 plus or minus radical 94. You guys do remember some things.
barely.
Okay. All right. Completing the square. This is stuff that is note card worthy right here.
Oh my gosh, let me write it.
I still see phones out, and that's driving me nuts.
What is new my title is?
All right. On your note card, you might want to write down the formula for completing the square. What is, first off, the purpose of completing the square is so that when you snowflake this, you get something squared. Remember that? This is called a perfect square trinomial.
Do you write this?
It's up to you. How do I figure what number goes there so that I get something that's squared here?
Oh, I remember this.
You take b, you divide it by 2, and you square it. So in this problem, 6 is our b value. What's 6 divided by 2?
Terry, shut up.
Equals 3. Squared is, so my c value that they're asking, find c, would be positive 9. I don't need to put the plus sign, they've already got it. And why is that helpful? Well, if you went the long way and did the snowflake, you get r plus 3 squared, which is exactly what we're looking for, something squared. So this question actually had two parts. It wanted to know what is that number, and then when you find that number, what's it going to factor into nicely.
What do you do after you get 9? What do you snowflake?
You snowflake this. 9 on the top, 6 on the bottom.
I don't know how to do this.
That's all that question's asking me to do. These two I'll have to actually solve from there. Okay?
I can't do this.
The 6 over 2 on the left. How'd you get the 2? The 3 squared before.
6 divided by 2 is 3.
No, but how'd you get the 2?
The formula. Okay? Now, number 6 is a little trickier. Because if you notice, your b value does not divide by 2 nicely, does it? Which means snowflaking is going to be ugly. So we actually learned a shortcut. Yep. To the factoring process. And it was when you take b and you divide it by 2, that's actually the number that ends up in your parentheses.
Oh, yeah, that way.
Remember that? 3 here was what ended up in your parentheses. So I don't need to worry about snowflaking because there's a fraction. And if I square this, isn't that negative 7 squared, which would be 49, and 2 squared, which would be 4? That's my c value. So you still divide it by 2. If it doesn't divide by 2 nicely, then leave it as a fraction and just square the top and the bottom. So? All right. So now let's use it to solve a problem. Now, when we solve a problem, do you see there was a blank up here?
Yeah.
There's no blank down here. So how am I going to get the blank?
By adding.
I move my c value over.
Who's the sun's out?
X squared plus 14x. When I've moved my c value, I now have a blank. But what do I need to do? If I have a blank on one side, what do I also have to have?
Another blank on the other.
A blank on the other side, too.
Yes.
So on this one, what is going to go in the blank? 14 over 2.
So 7 squared, 49.
So I put plus 49 and plus 49.
Oh, this makes sense.
What does this factor into? X plus 7 squared, because remember it's whatever you had when you divided by 2, equals, what's negative 7 plus 49? 43.
Wait, what? Negative 7 plus 49. Oh, negative 6. Oh, that one.
Did I say negative 7? I meant negative 6. Okay. Now, at this point, I solved the exact same way I solved number 4 up here. I square root both sides. 43 I know is prime. So I have x plus 7 equals plus or minus radical 43. And what's the last thing I do? Subtract 7 from both sides. So my answer is going to look like what? X equals negative 7 plus or minus radical 43. Okay. All right. Now, the trick with the completing the square ones is your a value must equal 1 in order for you to do it. In this one, does a equal 1? I'll talk to myself.
I'm sorry.
Does a equal 1 here? No. So I need to divide everything by 6 in order to get a to equal 1. That gives me n squared minus 4n. Do you notice there's no c value on this side of the equal sign? So I'm going to put the blank. 18 divided by 6 is 3, and I need that blank again. What is going to go in the blank this time? Negative 4 over 2 is negative 2. Squared is 4, so plus 4 and plus 4. So this becomes what? N minus 2. And again, you can go to the snowflake if you need to, if you don't remember that shortcut there. 3 plus 4 is 7. I'm going to square root both sides. So n minus 2 equals plus or minus radical 7. And the last thing I do, add 2. So what does my answer look like? N equals 2 plus or minus radical 7. Okay, so. Ah! Oh shoot, I dropped my pen. Okay, our last two problems are using the quadratic formula. Is the quadratic formula something you may want to put on your note card? Would probably be a good idea. So I'm actually going to go to a different piece of paper for this so that I have a little bit more room. First off, the quadratic formula is
Negative b plus or minus square root of a squared minus 4 over 2a.
You may want that on your note card. So, number 9 says a squared plus 3a minus 22 equals 0. Remember, when you are identifying a, b, and c to go in your quadratic formula, your equation must be in standard form, which means that everything needs to be on the same side, and it has to equal 0. So this one is in standard form. What is my a value? 1. What is my b value? And my c value?
Oh, we got it.
Now, this problem really bothers me that they use a as a variable just because I feel like that's kind of confusing with your a value. So just pretend that this is an x, if that's confusing for you, okay? So, going into the formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we simplify from here. So I have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of, and I like doing this whole thing in one step here. You ready? 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 22 gives me 97. All over 2. Can I simplify the square root of 97? I think it's prime, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Now, I'm not sure if my answer is going to be written like this, or if they're going to split up my fraction. If they split up my fraction, it's going to look like negative 3 over 2 plus or minus radical 97 over 2. So they'll just take both parts and put it over the denominator. You'll have to see on the test. I'm not sure which form they're going to write the answers in. Okay, but again, the test is multiple choice, so you should be able to just look and understand as long as you can recognize that those two mean the same thing. Okay? All right, last problem. Negative 3a squared minus 7a plus 2 equals negative 5a squared. Problem. Not in standard form.
What is standard?
I need to move everything to the same side, so I'm going to add 5a squared.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to give me 2a squared minus 7a plus 2 equals 0, right? So what's my a value? 2. My b value? Negative 7. And my c value? Also 2. All right, so negative 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times 2 all over 2 times 2. So negative 7 becomes positive 7. On the bottom I have 4. And let's see what under the radical becomes. Negative 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times 2 is 33. And if I draw a tree for 33, it's just 3 and 11. There's nothing that's going to come out, is there? So, again, I don't know if they're going to write the answer like that, or if they're going to split it up, it would look like this. You just need to recognize that both of those are valid answers. Okay? All right. Happy studying.